Today's guest is Michelle Gomez, who struggled with imposter syndrome and dealt with anxiety, fear, and a constant need for validation. She felt she didn't truly earn her success, but it just happened to stumble upon her by chance. Let's see how she overcame that and how she can help us to do so as well. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's focus is on relationships. I'm going to FinCon again this year, and it's a conference for people who are part of the media space in the financial world. Going to this conference has a multitude of benefits. The first was that it gave me the confidence and helped me overcome the imposter syndrome when I was first starting out. And we're going to talk about that today. I was also able to meet so many amazing people in the space, and many have joined us on this show. I also learned how to improve my craft and help others to improve theirs. These relationships have allowed me to do more than I could have ever done alone. It's a shift I have made from my younger days when I thought I had to do it all to be great. That's not true. We need to work with others and help them as well. This year I'm going to bring my entire family to the conference to help me build even better relationships. As you may know, my wife is 10x better than I am with this skill. Later on in the episode, Michelle's going to mention LinkedIn and how to connect with people for jobs. Using LinkedIn is an amazing resource to build relationships beyond your network. You'd be surprised at how close you are to the people you want to connect with. You have to be intentional and you have to build relationships before you need them. It's a lot easier to get people to do you a favor when you've already done them multiple favors. Do you have a plan for building relationships? Relationships are not just about business. We also have to build relationships and maintain them with our family and friends. This requires a commitment and the time to go to events together and to support each other. I mentioned earlier that I joined a new mastermind group. I'm going to make an effort to reach out to people in the group and provide feedback, as well as lifting up their spirits and encouraging them on their dreams. I know sometimes we may even feel like an imposter if we're trying to create relationships with successful people and wonder why they want to be friends with us. At the end of the day, we're all people. We have the same emotional needs. When you are successful, you have the added issue that people like you just because of your fame or money, and not because of who you are as a person. Being a true friend is what they want. People who stand by them in failure too. Do you go to new events to meet people? What about for work and for pleasure? If you have a hobby, do you find others who also enjoy that hobby? It's easier than ever to connect with people today around very specific interests. You just have to do it. Put yourself out there and say hi. Speaking of putting yourself out there and trying new things, what's holding you back in life from the things that you want? Do you have balance across your health, wealth, time, relationships, and spirituality? Having balance is important because one area out of balance can bring the rest crashing down. Can I help you create balance, clarify your goals, and get past an obstacle that's keeping you from living the life you want? Please email and we can set up a short call to see if we're a good fit. For many people, one session around a specific area helps them to take a giant leap forward. By the way, if you've heard something on a show that's helped you to achieve success, will you share it with us? We can even feature it on the show. If you have a question, email it in. We can do the same. I think that would benefit others as well. Let's meet our guest. Michelle is a self-proclaimed reformed corporate burnout. Michelle Gomez managed to find a slower pace of a career that allowed her time and space to address the imposter syndrome in her own life. Michelle then turned her attention to helping other high achievers recognize and overcome their own imposter syndrome struggles, writing a book about her own journey, Own Your Brilliance. An accomplished business executive with nearly 2 decades worth of experience in the male-dominated transportation and logistics industry. Michelle is also a strong advocate for women in the workforce, mentoring dozens of women to personal and professional success. Let's meet her. Welcome to Richer Soul, Michelle. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you, Rocky. It's great to be here.
I think we're going to have an exciting conversation. As always, we start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Growing up, I was raised in a single family home with my mom. She was raising my 2 brothers and myself, I being the oldest and the only daughter. So my mom was a well-respected human resources executive in her career. She made pretty good money for her caliber at the time, but being a single parent, raising 3 children in Southern California is still really expensive. And so she struggled here and there, and I kind of watched her make moves to provide and make sure that we had all of our needs met. But I actually learned how to balance a checkbook. Like she taught me when I was a kid how to call Bank of America and plug in all the numbers and go through her checkbook to see what was cashed, what wasn't, how to basically balance what was in her checking account. She taught me how to separate a certain amount of money every week that went into her savings. And she also taught me a little bit about her 401k, not a whole lot, but a little. And then when I got into school, really in my undergrad program, I didn't hear a whole lot about budgeting, personal finances, or anything like that. I actually learned that through another source. I started my first financial portfolio when we were about 21. We started investing in ourselves a little bit through an investment broker that we had met. That was a friend of mine. And so that's kind of where I got my financial aptitude, if you will. And then I just been growing from there ever since. I'm now past graduate school in my late 30s. So I've learned quite a bit since then.
And that's pretty amazing that she had you involved as a kid, getting involved in her finances and letting you walk through the steps. And then to start saving at 21 puts you so far ahead of the curve because compounding takes time. And the longer you have, the greater your chances of success and the bigger your outcome's going to be. So you're probably well on your way to having financial independence then.
From your mouth to God's ears, my friend. That's kind of the plan, right?
Absolutely. So are you doing anything else to teach your kids about money?
Yes. So what I've taught my kids about money is the value of need versus wants. Now, I will put out a disclaimer. My children are terribly spoiled, and it's not really us. My husband and I provide the things that they need, but they have multiple uncles and aunts and 2 very, very spoiling grandparents. They have this saying, when mom and dad say no, somebody else will say yes. So they tend to get their wants by the people who want to spoil them because by the grace of God, these kids are well-behaved children. They have good grades in school. So they deserve some spoiling here and there. But I do try to show them just the value of the wants versus the needs. They'll hear me when we go out shopping. We see something and I'll say, but do we need that? Is it a need or is it a want? My daughter now, is the oldest, is starting to really see it. Like she'll see a shirt that she really likes and she'll say, gosh, $45 for a shirt. I can probably buy 3 shirts at Burlington for $45. Like, she's starting to see the value, the stretch of $1. That's with my 12-year-old. With my 8-year-old, it's a little different because she doesn't really value things. She just wants things. But the money part of it is engaging with her just yet. But I do talk about things like savings and investing. And we're also a tithing family. So we do tithe 10% of our income every week out of our paychecks into our house of ministry. So there's a lot involved in looking at how we prioritize our finances and why we put certain amounts in different places outside of just our pockets.
That's quite interesting. Does that sometimes create a struggle between you and the family, between the spoiling and the trying to keep, I guess, a sense of balance, or are you okay with it?
It creates a struggle in a sense. That's a 2-part question. I'll answer the first part. So the principle of tithing is that if you tithe, then you don't really have to worry about not having enough, because it's sort of this, you sow a seed, and so therefore you will always have more than enough, more than you need, which since I've been a tither, and I've been a tither for about 10 years now, my financial situation and my living situation has completely elevated since I became a tither. So I can attest to this principle from a faith-based perspective. So the children don't really see that. Even my husband and I, we don't really see that money because we don't consider it ours. So we just kind of know we're not used to having it. So it goes automatically every week. So it's not a part of the budget per se. But when it comes to the kids wanting things that are unnecessary, in my opinion, if they're just wants, like tablets and game consoles and another new pair of Jordans or a pair of Vans, I don't feel bad for not buying those things if it ensures that I'm still following my principle of tithing. And I don't make them feel any sort of way like, well, it's either I tithe or I buy you shoes. What do you think the right thing to do is? I wouldn't even put that on them. I just know where my priority lies. And I know that this tithing principle has been an investment that has paid dividends upon dividends since I've been practicing it. And so I just say things like, well, maybe not this week, guys, but how about next week?
I think that abundance mentality does create that. When you're not holding on to your own and you can let go and connect in a sense spiritually, then the universe and God does take care of you as well. And I think that's something more people need to do.
Indeed. And even when I give them, they do earn an allowance. So even when I give them the allowance, that's the first thing I say. Like if I give my 12-year-old a $20 bill, I'll say, okay, what's 10% of 20? That's what you give when we go to church on Sunday.
And we've done something very similar with our kids. We have a portion of it is for giving and a portion is for saving, and then they can spend the rest. And your daughter sounds like my daughter in the sense that when she goes shopping, she's like, why would anyone pay $45 for a shirt? I can go buy a bunch of them for a lot cheaper. And so she's not into that brand conscious type of attitude. And that's important, I think, for kids to have, because I think it's a concept of self-worth. They have enough worth in themselves that they don't need to put something on to make them feel like they're worthy.
Correct. And I mean, she's 12, so she's getting pulled in multiple directions on what is socially acceptable with how you act, how you dress, how you look. And so she does get her hands on some pretty cool labels here and there. But I also make sure that she's still staying constant with who she is as an individual so that she doesn't let things impact her personality.
Sounds like you are doing an amazing job. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's hard. This parenting thing is not easy. Jeez.
No, it's not. It is hard, and it takes a lot of time and effort. Well, I guess we're at a turning point in the sense that my kids are going off to college. So we're not done, but we're in a new chapter.
Indeed. Congratulations. That's a great chapter to be in.
Thank you. It's been good, and it's been interesting learning some of the games at the college level and all the kind of things that you need to learn about.
Yeah.
So you wrote a book, Own Your Brilliance. What prompted you to write the book?
So the book is called Own Your Brilliance, Overcome Impostor Syndrome for Career Success. And I had struggled with the imposter syndrome for the majority of my career, and I still actively do the mindset work to ensure that it doesn't show its creepy little head too often. But what I did over the last 3 years was just analyze why I felt this way, why this experience was showing up for me. And I was able to reframe the experience so that it no longer stole the joy out of the accomplishments that I had attained up to that point. And it was such a sense of freedom that I thought, gosh, I can't sit on my hands and not share this. I have to put this out there for other working women that may be struggling with their identity in the workforce so that they can thrive both at home and at work. And then on top of that, I'm an avid reader. I read a book a month. So I have tremendous respect for authors. And I've always just dreamt of becoming one of them. So that's what catapulted me to finally put a book out.
Well, congratulations. I mean, most people spend their time saying, I want to do X, and they don't do it. You actually did it. And so that's very commendable that you stood up and did the work.
Thank you.
So when you say imposter syndrome, what exactly does that mean?
So the imposter syndrome is a behavioral phenomenon where high achievers struggle to internalize their success. They tend to explain away their accomplishments rather than owning them. It's a consistent worry and fear about being discovered as a fraud or a phony among what they would perceive to be, quote unquote, real deals walking around. This is a term that's been coined since a 1982 article came out by Georgia State University professors Pauline Rose Clancy and Dr. Suzanne Imez. And so just following up on their work and the work that's been done by other amazing people like Dr. Valerie Young and the authors that have spoke about this subject matter in their books in certain excerpts, like Sheryl Sandberg mentioned it in Lean In, Susie Moore mentioned it in her book, What If It Does Work Out? Even former communications director of the White House, who was Jennifer Palmieri, she just recently put out a book and speaks about her experience with it as well. So it's very prevalent. And I just thought, okay, I'm going to add my 2 cents on the subject matter to help women as well.
So I'm going to let you in on a secret.
Mm-hmm.
Men have it too. They just don't talk about it.
Oh, yes. This comes up quite a bit. I mean, the statistics show that 70% of the society has experienced it at one point or another. But you are absolutely correct. The difference is men frame the experience differently than women. And as a result, either they don't come forward or they just able to overcome it with a little more ease than we would.
I think guys tend to bury it. They just don't think about it. It comes up and it holds them back as a fear. And then they just push it away and they kind of beat it down and move along.
Can I share with you what I found when this has come up with certain men?
Sure.
What I have found is that men are just more forgiving of themselves when they make a mistake. If they make a mistake, it's like, okay, duly noted. I won't do that again. I learned a lesson. Moving on. Meanwhile, with a woman, the fear of making a mistake is so prevalent, is so strong that they can't disconnect the action from their identity. So the men that I've spoken to, and even in Dr. Young's book that she put out, Dr. Valerie Young, who gave me an advance praise on my book, by the way. You can see her comments in my book. She's basically the leading expert in our current generation of this subject matter. And even she says that men just seems to have this ability to say, okay, that I tie the mistake, the error to an action, a decision made, and they forgive themselves. Like, okay, I learned, I move on. When a woman tends to make that same mistake, it's more heavily shrouded in shame. And they tend to carry that sort of regret and fear with them for a lot longer period of time.
That's interesting. I've known some people who have tried some side businesses or got involved in real estate, and they made mistakes. And because they made one mistake, they've been really fearful to try again. And I'm talking about guys who've done this.
Yeah.
So it does hold across that we tend to hold on to those fears. Now, it's funny because the generation behind us, the people in the 20s, are kind of told to almost go the opposite, is fake it till you make it, which is a little bit different almost. It's kind of almost accepting the imposter syndrome, kind of pushing through it, I guess. Have you seen that, or is that not something you've come across?
I personally have had a chance to talk to a few millennials in my private Facebook group. I do offer a weekly content in my Facebook group and talk about a lot of things career-wise and just work and family balance. And a commonality that I have found with maybe the millennials or anyone under 30 is their struggle with the age, like the opposing ageism. They're credentialed, right? So they have a bachelor's degree in something at this point, possibly even working on a master's degree. They have the ambition. They're willing to work, but they want what they want right now. And so a lot of times They feel that they are not given a fair shot because of the way they look. They look too young. I've actually had someone in my group tell me that in her department, she was told, well, you're a little green, you got to earn your stripes, and then we'll talk about it. And she's like, but I don't understand why they won't even take me seriously just because I look a certain way or because I'm, 24. I feel like I would like to be invited to be a part of certain projects, and I'd like to be considered to partake in certain events that would allow me to be around people with some power and some clout to get to just make relationships with. They don't seem to struggle with feeling like they don't belong. Usually your observation is correct that they seem to be pushed to believe like this sort of sense of entitlement that, no, you deserve it. You could be there. You should ask. Go ahead and ask the question and see what you can get, which I commend them for, because that's actually a part of my program. And even something in my book is to try to help women just muster up the courage to ask for what you need. To hear these 24-year-olds, kind of like knocking on the door, trying to kick it in, like, this is what I need and how soon can I get it? It's so interesting to hear how they think. And I'm glad to see that they're bold and brave enough to value what they have to offer and are willing to ask for what they want. But then you have to coach them in a different direction a little bit, like, okay, but we still got to earn our stripes a little bit, guys. Still got to put in some work here.
And I think that happens every generation. It was the same way 30 years ago. We all just think that we should start at the top until someone says, no. And that happens. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's youthful enthusiasm and maybe a little bit of naivete. And
absolutely. And I think there's something to be said about every generation. Like you just mentioned, at one point, our own resumes were very green and somebody gave us a shot. So I trust that regardless of how green their resumes are, they will have an opportunity. I mean, everyone doesn't make it to where they are. Nobody entered into the workforce and just got, the high rise office in the corner with an assistant and a company car. It just, we all had to work our way up there. But there's nothing wrong with trying to seek out that big shot, that big opportunity.
You're absolutely correct. I think what I have done, especially with my kids, is teach them how to constantly be giving and playing at the higher level so that they aren't always viewed as being green. In other words, don't wait for someone to pick you. That's a lottery mentality. Go out and start doing things so that people notice you and say, I want you on the team. I want you to go lead this. I see that you're willing to go and to do things that are fearful for other people, like public speaking or taking ownership of something and admitting you screwed up.
Absolutely. I mean, getting your foot in the door is just one way. If you can get your foot on the door at the ground level, you can perform yourself to the top, but people have to get a chance to see that. And so a lot of times I want to make sure that these millennials breaking into the workforce understand that, just getting in at the bottom level is not a bad thing. At least you're in. You can meet some people. You have an opportunity to showcase your abilities, and somebody will notice you. And if they don't notice you right away, at least you've put in a few years and did a few things, and you can take that experience elsewhere. Still a stepping stone. It's all part of the process.
It is. It takes years to grow and to gain wisdom and to have experiences. And some people are lucky, they do it faster. And some people who skyrocket very quickly also very quickly fall because they didn't have all of the knowledge and the skills and so forth to take them where they ended up. And so it all works out, I guess, in the end.
It does.
So I guess the question is when people have imposter syndrome, do they fear that they are not as good as people think they are, or do we just not value how good we are?
It's a little bit of both. Certainly, it's a disconnect between what the people see versus what you see, because by all accounts, these imposter syndrome strugglers are accomplished individuals. These people have bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, PhDs. They've been featured in the Associated Press and the Huffington Post. These are people who have written books and done great work, led a lot of people. So by all accounts, they seem like very accomplished individuals. And you would think, oh, this person has got all the confidence in the world. But a part of the way that they view competency changes their behaviors and thoughts around a task. And so therefore, they tend to disqualify the sense of accomplishment that they experience when they arrive at a goal. It's very short-lived. It's less of a feeling of pride or a sense of pride for achieving something and more of a sense of relief. And so it's easy to feel like when someone else is enjoying their achievement, you're like, okay, they're a real deal. Look at that. He or she is enjoying what she just accomplished. Meanwhile, I'm over here like, okay, let's clap for like 5 seconds and then it's over because I have to move on to the next task. So it's a disconnect between your credentials and your capabilities versus how you feel about your outputs that you put out in the world.
I guess we tend to minimize ourselves and we tend to put others on a pedestal sometimes. And that's something that we need to work on overcoming, and just being able to say thank you and to accept praise is, in a sense, a skill that needs to be learned.
Yes. And the reason why is because we should be able to receive praise and give praise without attaching judgment to it. Because that's the problem for the imposter syndrome struggler. They've attached a little bit of judgment towards being happy for yourself and saying out loud, I completed this. I'm proud of myself. That took a lot to do, and when being able to say thank you sincerely when someone says, hey, Rocky, congratulations on that. That was amazing. You did a really good job. And say thank you sincerely. But because we attach judgment to saying stuff like thank you or sharing your accomplishments, it's hard to give out that same level of positive reinforcement to people who may be leading behind us or following us. And so this is why the imposter syndrome needs to be addressed up in the professional world, because then it trickles into the personal world, of course, but it could impact leadership styles, the department cultures, turnover, profits. It's something that if it's not checked, it could impact decision making.
Absolutely. And do you know why high achievers have these issues, these voices in our head that hold us back?
From what I studied, there's a little commonality in between the upbringing of people who struggle with this. A lot of people who struggle with the imposter syndrome have a high prevalence of broken homes. So there's been some confusion in the messaging at home. For example, if you're being told, don't steal, and then your parents are stealing, that's the disconnect, right? That's just an example. But the messaging that they're getting at home is not being played out in reality and the behaviors. And so therefore it's confusing to know value versus message. So if a parent is consistently telling their child to go for the gold, A's and B's are the only thing that matter. Don't come to this house with a C. If you're first, you're last, the little Ricky Bobby line, then when they see a parent kind of not fulfill those same things, those same values, it confuses the child with some of the messaging. And so that could be taken into the workforce when you're expected to be a gold star junkie and get everything done perfectly and on time and under budget. And if you just happen to have a flaw here and there, that parental voice in the back of your head could be ringing true to you that you should have done that better. That could have done better. Even if your boss, your business partner is like, hey, that was great. 80, 88, 90%, it was still pretty good. But to you, it's not enough because it's not what you were told. So there's a little bit of that. And then there are also, unfortunately, is some data that supports that people who have struggled with the imposter syndrome had lived through some sort of emotional or physical trauma as children. There's a lot of just masking feelings of being okay, but relating it to your ability to perform a job, a task, meet a goal as a way of masking some of the pain of your past.
I've read a lot of books lately that have to do with psychology, and they have nothing to do with raising kids, but there is an underlying theme in all the books that as kids, these people struggled with something. It could have, and it didn't have to be major. It could have just been the lack of love of a parent. They don't feel like they are enough. And that feeling and that lacking that occurs in childhood follows us into adulthood. And if we never fix it, or we never deal with it or challenge it, it can tremendously hold us back as an adult.
Absolutely. This topic has stayed in my gut for the last maybe 4 months. I think my next book is going to have to be about this. But I truly believe that as parents, we have to really grow ourselves up and deal with our stuff so that we don't pass on any of the generational weight to our children. Our children should be allowed to show up in this earth and have their own experience, not take on what we didn't finish or not take on what we haven't worked through. And so I feel that mental health, mindfulness, self-care, these are all important factors of a working parent. And that's something I talk about in my book about, developing a morning routine that allows you to pour into yourself before you pour into anything or anyone else. But there's this epidemic that I see of parents we're not growing ourselves up to clear our stuff up before we let our children have their own experience.
Some of that, I think, is generational in the sense that we live in a multi-generation home. And I know my parents, my wife's parents, that whole generation had very different mentalities about doing things and safety and risks and all of these things. And we have to fight them with our kids. It's like, no, the kids need to learn to go out on their own, take chances and do things. It is somewhat of a constant struggle. And I always say, kids don't listen to what you say, they listen to what you do, which is what you're saying. They're watching your actions. They're the best people at picking out hypocrisy between what you say and what you do. They will follow what you do much more than what you say. In that process, they lose respect for their parents. And I think that's why a lot of parents have trouble with their teenagers, is because they are not congruent between their words and actions. And the kids have figured it out.
Yeah, that's very true.
So you've had some different experiences as a woman in the workforce and dealing with corporate life. And we've had a lot of people who've had corporate burnout as guests. Would you share a little bit of that story?
Sure. I have been in the logistics and transportation industry since I was 19 years old. So it's just been my home for me. That industry has been where I grew up, and I'm still very active even today in that role. I am actually a regional sales executive for a trucking company even today. I was in a logistics industry for just under 13 years, and I was quickly creating an imbalance in my life that affected my identity as a person. 80% of who I was my job, was my career. I found my confidence in my career. I found my self-worth in my career, my value in my career. And then the 20% that was left over had to be shared between my husband, the kids, my mom, my siblings, my friends. And in that 20%, no time was spent on myself. So I wasn't taking care of myself at all. I wasn't working out or meditating, praying, nothing. I didn't even know what self-care was, honestly. And then I quickly started to notice that I couldn't sustain that pace of work. I mean, because I was not only, when I wasn't at work, I was thinking about work, I was talking about work, I'm checking my emails at the dinner table. I would regularly open my laptop on the weekends just to get caught up so that Mondays wouldn't be so hectic. By doing this, I wasn't being present with myself or my family. 80% of me went to work. So at work, everything was fine. My employees got what they needed. My bosses got what they needed. Deadlines were met. Projects were complete. Reports were done. But at home, dinner wasn't getting cooked. Laundry was piling up. Missing kids' things at school. Just, it wasn't a good life. And I just finally realized that my health started to deteriorate because of it. And I was not living a very healthy life at that point. So I just prayed. I'm like, Lord, I need something. Something needs to change. I want to continue to grow as a logistician, but I don't want to work this much. This is going to cost me my marriage if I'm not careful. Lo and behold, a prayer was answered, and I actually got a call from an industry friend who I'd known for over 10 years. And he's like, hey, I need someone on the West Coast. He flew me out to Colorado. I interviewed, and by the time I landed back at home after the interview, I had an offer letter in my inbox that gave me the freedom of time that I was looking for. So I would work from home. I wouldn't have any direct reports. So that freed up a lot of my time. They offered me a benefits package and incentives, and they doubled my salary. So it was the answer to my prayer. And ever since I took that job, I've been able to slow down and really just reconnect with who I am as a person. And I have found that it's made me a better woman, a better wife, a better mom, a better employee, a better coach, because I am well aware of my value as a person. Everything I do it wholeheartedly, and I'm present in while I'm doing it. And because I'm present and I'm enjoying it, I can certainly get the outcome that I'm looking for. So my job loves me because when I'm doing my job and I'm meeting with customers and I'm selling our services, I'm connecting with people and I'm creating an experience. When I'm coaching people, they feel connected to me and I'm fully vested in them becoming their best version of themselves. When I'm with my kids, I'm with my kids. I'm listening to them. I'm having conversations. And so just learning the ability to be present, to pulling out of that burnout mode was the biggest, most beautiful lesson I've learned in the last 3 years. And so now I make it my heart's work to help others achieve that same level of awareness.
I'm working on being present too. It's a struggle. In today's world of iPhones, it's even harder to become present because something is constantly dinging at you and setting off emotional hits that drag you into there to keep looking for the reward or the next thing that's coming along. And learning to turn that off is difficult. So doing the self-work is important. It sounds like you have spent a few years on self-work. And I know I've had other guests and they've all kind of been the same thing. It's like, you know, something's wrong and you start to fix it, but it takes time. And I think that's what people need to understand. Self-work takes years. It took you years to get to where you are today. It's going to take you time to get to where you want to be. So you talked about morning routine, and let's dig into that. And then what other type of self-work are you doing?
So the morning routine has evolved over time. It's kind of like, I kind of call it yoga. You know, when you first go to your first yoga class, you're not as flexible. You don't know all the cues. You don't know what all the poses are called. Meanwhile, you get to look around everyone who's been doing this for a while. They're a little better at it. So you kind of got to keep evolving and grow with it. And based on your needs or where you find the meat of it is where you can evolve your routine. So I initially started pretty simple. I would just wake up. I'd spend 15, 20 minutes in my daily devotional in my Bible. And then I would read a chapter out of one book. And then I would journal for a few minutes based on what I learned in my devotional, what I learned in the book, and just some little notes for myself. That's how it started. But over time, it's evolved. I've implemented certain things. I've pulled out other things. I've done everything from mirror exercises to affirmations, meditation, whatever it is that's going to set the intention for the day. That's what I've done for 3 years consistently now. I have a morning routine where I wake up and I spend an hour with myself. And it's been so rewarding to just take care of me because I can't take care of anyone else unless my cup is full. I have no resource to give from if my cup is empty. And so I would encourage people to find what is it that you can do that you enjoy so much that you just lose track of time doing it. Is it meditating? Is it reading? Is it journaling? Is it, making yourself a cup of coffee and opening up a really good self-help book? Do you enjoy watching videos that give messages of hope and encouragement and determination? Whatever it is that sort of feeds your soul at the moment, just know that your soul will evolve over time and your needs will change over time.
People are freaking out going, how am I supposed to spend an hour in the morning doing all of this? And I get it because my morning routine is probably closer to 2 hours between the time I get up and I do my readings and I go work out and I come back and take a shower and do the meditations and read. It's a long process, but it helps tremendously.
Yes. And it doesn't have to be an hour if you don't want it to be an hour at first. I certainly wouldn't. Like I said, it's yoga. So if you've never done yoga before, I don't encourage you to go every morning an hour of yoga. Like start slow. Start with something like 10 minutes, 15 minutes a day in the morning, but just find something that you can fully engage in. And those, even if it is just 15 minutes, just that you can be fully present and take away from it what you want to use to set the intention for the day.
Absolutely. And one of the things you mentioned throughout this, and we should probably focus on it as well, one of the major tenets here is time. We only have so much of it, and learning to manage our time. And then, as you talked about, we all have to work or create an income in some fashion. And then the balance of that and family and everything else. How have you been able to find the time to bring balance across all these other areas?
Two big things. I certainly learned the value of time, how to value my time differently. And it's what I coach people to do in my program, is to understand that what you have to bring as far as value has so much more weight than just time and money. I think that's why we look at jobs where we're sitting there for 40, 50 hours a week and we're thinking, well, the only reason I am able to earn this salary is because I'm sitting here for 8 to 10 hours. But when I talk to women that are in those scenarios, I'm like, okay, now out of those 8 to 10 hours, when you take a look at your tasks and the things that you're responsible for, your contribution that you're making on a daily basis, do you really need 8 to 10 hours to do those things well? Half the time it's no, I can probably knock it all out in 4 hours. Okay. So if you were working independently, and we're given the same tasks, and we're to eliminate distractions and set the atmosphere so that you can fully engage in those tasks, you can knock it out in 4 or 5 hours, right? Like, yeah, okay, so what would you do with the other 3, 4 hours of the day? And it's stuff like go to the gym, or probably get some grocery shopping done, or probably go sit down, have a cup of coffee with my grandma. I barely see her. Things like that. It's like, okay, let's value our time differently. And instead of, well, let's tie ourselves to this cubicle so that we can show that we've earned this money. It's like, no, value your time like this. Do your job, do it well, because the value that you bring is the return on investment that they're getting. They're not getting an investment on you sitting there. They're getting an investment on the value of the skills and talent that you bring to the table. And then spend other times doing what's going to have to be done so that you can show up that way. If that means going to the gym, if that means sitting down for half an hour and having a cup of tea with your grandma, if that means, knocking out a couple of to-do things so that you don't have such a heavy, hectic day when you get home, I would ask you to value your time differently based on what you can get accomplished by staying present, how you can minimize your workload by delegating properly. It doesn't have to all be you. It's okay to delegate some tasks to people so that your mind is clearer. And I focus on that at work and at home. If there's people in my department or in my organization that can complete a task that I really don't need to be doing because I should be focused in other areas, then I will delegate it. I'll ask them, can you please take on this task? Same thing at home. I don't necessarily enjoy spending 2 hours cleaning my house. I might outsource that so that I don't like being in a messy house either. So if I can have clarity of mind and spend 2 more hours just doing what I love, which is, listening to jazz music, pouring myself a glass of wine at the end of the day and cook dinner for my family, talk to my husband about how his day went, playing with my dogs, chatting it up with my kids, I'd rather do that. So just learning to value your time differently, delegating where you need to, and don't judge yourself for asking for help. Asking for help is such a huge thing in women in the workforce. It's like they want to be able to do it all to show how superwoman they are, but you're going to burn yourself out, sis. You need to just say, hey, husband, can you help with the kids with the homework while I do the dishes? Or can you pull the laundry out and fold while I'm upstairs getting an extra hour of work done? Whatever it is, just ask for help. If you need to bring in people to help, if you need a housekeeper, if you need a gardener, whatever, don't judge yourself for not being everything to everyone.
I think that's great advice. This month I'm reading the book, Get Things Done. And a big part of that book is literally figuring out, first and foremost, what are the tasks that you need to get done, and then putting in the systems to just knock them out quickly, efficiently, and to get rid of things from your plate that you don't need to do. In our household, When it came to laundry, we taught the kids very early on to do laundry so that it was off our plate. My kids mow the lawn. It's off my plate. They help with a lot of these different things so that we're not stuck with all the work. And I think for mothers, it's more so. I think mothers feel like love is doing things for your kids. But what I have seen is, especially now that that's the biggest complaint my daughter has at college. All these kids have shown up. They don't know how to cook. They don't know how to do their laundry. They don't know how to live life. And it's because their parents were doing everything for them and probably doing it out of love. But the end result isn't what you probably wanted. So take as much as you can off your plates. Have other people help you. Get support systems and get the help you need so that you have the time to do what you truly want to do instead of what you feel you have to do, I guess.
Absolutely. That's the first and biggest step of balance is those two things. Changing the way you value your time and releasing the judgment behind asking for help. After that, it's really the freedom to design what you want your life to look like, and it's a play on negotiation. Because in my program, I help women design what it is that they want as far as a daily routine. What do you want your day to look like? And so we start to get through some of those first two steps of developing a morning routine that ingests them daily with positive messaging to set the intent. But also, what do you want to do with your time? How do you value your time based on what you bring to the table? And where can we sort of delegate and ask for help? But then from then on, we got to then direct that conversation to our bosses or our teams, and it's a difficult conversation sometimes to have with your boss or your manager to say, hey, you know what? I'm feeling a little burned out. I love my job. I love what I do. I would like to see if maybe we can have a discussion about a little bit more flexibility. If it means like spending one day a week working from home, is that possible? Do you mind if I take a 2-hour lunch Tuesdays and Thursdays? I've signed up for a Pilates class and it's just good for my mental and physical health. I'd like to take better care of myself. I will make up for the work at the end of the day, or I won't. If you're salaried, I'll be sure that everything is completed and done decently and in order before I leave for the day. And I'm still available after work if you need to reach me. Shouldn't impact your value and how well you do your job. This is just you negotiating your time in a manner that your boss can see why you need to do this. Because in order for you to do even better work, you need to show up as your best self. And if that means taking an extra hour in the morning or an extra hour midday or working remotely once or twice a week, I think that is a plausible negotiation conversation to have. And it's just positioning my clients to ask for what they need confidently.
And that's very true. You need to do that. So I guess the question, before you coach them, how many people have actually thought about what they want their day to look like?
You'd be surprised. I think when you have been sort of cultivated in the corporate world without that lack of flexibility, right? If you've been taught that you need to go to a cubicle and sit there for 40, 50 hours a week, you're limited on what you think you are capable of as far as reorganizing your time. And so there's always this, I can't do that. Oh, there's no way I can go to the gym in the morning. Are you kidding? I already get up at 5 a.m. as it is, and I have to be at the office by 7. There's no way I could possibly fit in a trip to the gym when I got to get my kids ready and off to school. And then in the afternoon, it's like, oh, there's no way. My kid has soccer practice and the other one's got drama class. There's always this reasons behind, right? But if you think about all of those reasons, it's because we're not asking for help. So you can't ask somebody to take your kid to, is there another parent maybe that you can say, hey, can I pay you gas money and you take my kid to soccer practice with your kid? Is that cool? Or have the conversation in the morning with your spouse, like, hey, since you don't have to be in till later, is there any chance that maybe 2 days out of the week you can take them to school so that I can hit the gym in the morning and then head off to work? There's negotiation being done, but we have to be willing to ask for what we need and have the freedom to design a day that we would like to have. But it's really, like you mentioned it earlier with working mothers, it's sort of like, no, this is how I show dedication, is by burning myself out.
And that's a shame. And I'm surprised more people don't do that. Say, hey, soccer practice is 5 days a week. How about we each take a day and then we can have 4 days off? How many of you mothers, fathers would like that? I think you get buy-in immediately and everyone picks a day, and that gives you 4 free days, and every day someone else is dropping them off. And it's all doable if you are intentional and you think through, what are my options and how can I bring this about? And how do I make it happen?
Be collaborative. But unfortunately, you've heard this before. How many times have you seen people at games and so-and-so's child is up to bat and they're like, oh my God, this kid's father is never around. Or this kid's mom, she misses all the games. She's only here like once a week. And so that judgment kind of comes into play. And that's what we're afraid of. And so we burn out. It's the hardest to really deliver this message with the women because there's so much outside of work that is used to judge us. We could be doing great at work. We're knocking it out of the park. But if our kids are maladjusted or they're getting bad grades and the house is a mess and the husband's unhappy, it's like it sort of just takes away our shine. So we have this pressure to do it well everywhere. But we're one person with 2 hands. That's it. So I try to coach my clients to, okay, let's try to stop being the ace at everything and start being the ace at the things you actually love doing.
And you have to figure out what you love doing and what you don't like doing and be clear with that.
Yep.
In a male-dominated world, what should I tell my daughter as to how she can make her mark and how she can be heard? It's funny because she just did some projects where she was working with adults to bring them about. And she made a comment to me recently. She goes, when all the men get together in the room, they all talk and they talk loudly and I can't get a word in edgewise.
Mm-hmm.
How does she stake her place and make her voice heard?
It's tough. I still have to struggle with that even to this day. Fortunately, not in my direct employer, but just in the industry, because I am in a male-dominated industry. And it's very true. You can walk into a room, and if you're the only woman or the only woman in a group setting, it's very easy to be quiet and want to just kind of back into the shadows and be unnoticed for a little while. So what I would tell her is, first and foremost, don't let these small incidences overshadow everything else she's bringing to the table. There are times and places where her voice and her expertise and her contribution are going to be valued. It's just finding the organization that has that sort of culture, because they exist. I mean, she will run into the good old boys stuff that happens, but it's not everywhere. I went from one company who had that good old boys mentality and still does to this day. I actually encounter them in my travels here and there. And it shocks me that even after leaving them 3 years ago, when I'm in the same room with them, that they still do it. I'm like, okay, this is a culture thing here. Meanwhile, at my current organization, that never happens. It doesn't. So it's just, they exist. These organizations exist out here. So I would ask her to own her voice. Don't let the diminishing nature of other companies affect how she feels about her value and what she has to contribute, but to simply keep an eye out for the right organization where she can thrive and doesn't have to change or minimize who she is in order to do well.
And I think that's good advice for everyone. Every company has a culture, and you need to figure out if the culture of the company matches who you are. No matter how good the company is, if it's not a good cultural fit, it's not the place for you. And she did that with college. She was looking for a college that was a cultural fit for her. And if it wasn't going to be that right fit, she didn't want to go there. I think a lot of us I don't know if we just don't think to do that or don't realize how much it affects things in life.
It absolutely does, because can you imagine if you assume there's no opportunity or there's no choice, you have no power in the decision of where you're going to work? Those morning drives into the office must be miserable, because you're like, oh gosh, here we go. Like, nobody wants to live that life. You want to be excited and you want to know, like, oh, they're going to, when I get there, I'm going to be able to be who I am and be who I am to my best ability, and people are going to appreciate it. So that's why when I do work with clients and we get to that time in the coaching program, when we start to actually negotiate other opportunities, like seek out maybe a transition to a different organization, I attribute it to dating. It's kind of like dating, right? Like when you date, you go on a blind date with someone. We'll call that the interview. You don't sit across from somebody at a dinner table and they say, you know what? I like you. I like you a lot. I think you're going to be my girlfriend. Yeah, that's it. I decided you're going to be my girlfriend. It doesn't go that way. You get to decide if you want to be the girlfriend. You have a say-so here, So just because you go to an organization and you go to this interview, you knock it out. If you don't ask the right questions, to know what kind of culture they're in and what do they value, what are some of the common denominators of quote unquote successful people in this firm. And you can start to see like, this is not in line with where I want to drive to and be for 40, 50 hours a week. You can ask the questions. And even if they come with you with an offer, again, it's an offer. It's like dating. They can say, how about a second date? Or how about you move in and we get married? And you could decide, you know what? Thanks. But no, I'm going to continue looking. You don't have to take it. You have a say-so. And I think that empowerment of the decision-making process and career transitions is something that we don't teach young ladies. So we need to get them engaged in that so that they can participate in the decision-making process.
And the cool thing is these days you can get on the internet and there's a lot of different websites that will actually have people talking about the culture of the organization that they work for. I know they have them for colleges, and that's how my daughter ruled out a lot of colleges, by reading what the people there said and seeing if it resonated with her. And I'm not sure if Glassdoor does it, but I know there are some different websites where you can read about company culture and then you start to get an idea, is this the kind of place I want to work or not? And then also understand within a company, each department has its own culture. So you need to make sure it matches up across all the different areas.
Yep. We look up in glassdoor.com. We look at Indeed, LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a great resource where you can actually connect with people who worked in the firm, even in the role that you're interviewing for. So you can say, hey, you worked as the director of communications for ABC company 2 years ago. I see that you left. Can you share with me why you left? I'm interviewing with them. What can I expect about the culture? These communications are available to you. You can just connect with people and ask these questions.
And that right there is a massive gold nugget, because the guy who has left 2 years ago will tell you the truth versus someone who's still there.
Correct.
And you will have true insight as to the pluses and minuses of where you're going and what the issues are of that particular role and what the role really is, because what they write down doesn't always mean that's what it is.
So true.
You've touched on this a bit throughout the conversation, but how has your faith played a role in your life?
Well, I really wanted to be able to look in the mirror and see what God saw. I mean, I had so much positive reinforcement from humans. My boss told me I was great. My mother says she's proud of me. My husband's so proud of me. My kids like, Mom, we look up to you. And it's great to hear all that. But it's like, why couldn't I look in the mirror and see what they saw? And so rather than try to tap into the mind of a human, I just prayed that, God, let me see what you see, please. Like, let me just appreciate who you created me to be. Because through my faith, I realized that when I didn't believe in myself or I limited the value I had on myself, I was sort of insulting his work. He's like, I'm the perfecter. I make everyone. I picked out all of your hair follicles. I picked out your tone of skin, like the way your eyes sit and your nose and your little quirks. Those were all created by me. I handpicked every single one of those. So are you here to tell me that you're judging my work? And so I was like, okay, I don't want to judge your work. If you could just maybe explain why you picked these certain characteristics. So that conversation between God and I, through consistent prayer, meditation, and reading the Word tells me a lot about what He says about me and how He thinks about me. And so when I struggled to appreciate who I was, I just instead would focus on how can I get closer to believing about me what He says about me or thinks about me. So that really closed the gap on a lot of the self-doubt and self-judgment that I placed on myself.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That was very insightful.
Thank you.
So based on our conversation today, we always like to leave people with an action step. What's one thing people can do today to move themselves forward?
You need some clarity. Clarity is huge. Like you had asked earlier about what people want for their daily lives. If you don't have a vision about what you're trying to go, then you will just take whatever comes your way and assume that that is the next best step for you. My sincere piece of guidance is this. Get very, very clear on what your North Star is or your end game. What is it? Are you trying to be the CEO? Are you trying to be your own boss? Are you just trying to be the director so that you don't have to travel as much? Do you want to spend more time with your kids? Do you want to spend more time taking care of your parents? What is it that you want for yourself in the next 5 years? Because if you are very, very clear on what your North Star is right now in this season of your life, then it's very easy from then on to make choices that are in line with that North Star. If the roadmap between now and that North Star presents you with an opportunity to make a decision that leads you away from the North Star, then you can feel confident about saying no. You can say, okay, no, that's not in the map. That's not one of the stops. But if you have an opportunity that does inch you closer and closer to that clear North Star, then you won't feel so anxious about it turning out well for you. At least it's a step in the right direction.
And that's excellent advice. When you know where you're going, it's a lot easier to figure out how to get there and to stay on the path and not get enticed by shiny objects that pull you away from your end game. But you've got to know where you want to go instead of waiting for someone else to pick it or the lottery of life to provide it. So I think that is wonderful, wonderful advice.
Yes, got to be careful because your ego is not your amigo. Sometimes that ego can get sparked up with a shiny new opportunity or a shiny new piece of machinery. And you think, oh gosh, yeah, for sure. But if you're trying to save money because you want to leave the state and buy property in another state or invest, or you want to go back to graduate school or whatever you want to do, then buying that brand new Mercedes in 6 months is probably not going to get you closer to that North Star. So be clear with what you want for yourself in the next 5 years. And then make sure that from here on out, you're affirming that thought, you're visualizing that thought so that subconsciously you attract opportunities to yourself that'll get you closer and closer to that.
Absolutely. If people would like to learn more about you, about your coaching, about the book, where can they connect and where can they find you?
Well, we've actually created a page on my website just for your listeners, just for the richer souls. So if you go to my website, it'll be Michelle, that's Michelle, middle initial M for Martha, and Gomez, GOMEZ.com/richer soul. So if you go there, you get access to some really cool freebies. You can get a free copy of my book. You can take a imposter syndrome assessment to figure out what competency type you are. And you can also schedule a free 30-minute strategy call with me. So if you need clarity on what your North Star is, I'd be happy to help you with that.
And thank you so much for those special gifts. That's so kind of you. And I encourage people to check them out. It was an honor to have you on today, Michelle. Thank you for sharing.
No, thank you.
So today's action step was get clarity on your end game. It makes life so much easier when we know where we're going and what we want. It's amazing how the universe responds and starts providing us with what we need to achieve those goals. It's not automatic, and you do have to do plenty of the work, but it is possible. I really enjoyed Michelle's insights, and let's face it, we all face imposter syndrome in some parts of our lives. We need to address that person in the mirror if we want to get past it. Check out the special link she provided just for you and for some of her freebie offers. MichelleMGomez.com/richer soul. I'll put it in the show notes. Where do you face imposter syndrome? Have you created the time to do what you love? What's your thrilling day and life look like? What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I or Michelle help you achieve your goals? Just email one of us, and we can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit. For many people, at least with me, one session allows them to take a giant leap forward. If you're still listening, you must have liked the episode. Please do share it with a few friends. We'd both appreciate that. You can always get me at rocky@richersoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I've shared has helped you. Thanks for listening, and have an abundant week.